Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us for the premier economic forecast for real estate professionals featuring Chief Economist Patrick Jankowski from the Greater Houston Partnership. I'm Tori Ramirez, your 2025 Young Professionals Network Advisory Group Chair, and this is my colleague and fellow advisory group member, Eddie Massa. Thank you, Eddie, for helping us kick off the year with critical information for our members and our clients.
Thank you, Tori. I'm honored to be here and anxious to hear what 2025 has in store for us. We sure have a lot of company. We actually have a record number of 1,300 HAR members who have registered for today's forecast. We'd like to take a moment to thank so many of you for your donation to the Hartsfield Elementary School Toy Drive and Christmas celebration. We have raised more money this year than ever, and thanks to you, these kids will have a wonderful Christmas. I was just reading a press release from HAR about indicators for next year. It talked about how the market has held up really well in the second half of 2024, with more homes available and prices rising at a slower pace, which is a good sign for 2025. Of course, interest rates will still be important to watch, but it looks like there are some promising opportunities for both buyers and sellers right now.
Wow, Eddie, that's amazing information. I would like to say thank you again to our realtor family for donating to Hartsfield Elementary School. It doesn't surprise me. We know that realtors have big hearts. Before we get to the forecast, I'd like to take a moment to congratulate HAR Chairman Shay Cotter and his executive committee that includes Chair-elect Teresa Hill and two former YPN members, Kat Robinson as Vice Chair 1 and Susan Honora as Vice Chair 2, along with Secretary Treasurer Troy Cothran and past Chairman Thomas Mouton.
I heard that Shay chose the Mad Men theme for the group photo, which is super cool. Congratulations, everybody.
Now, you might be wondering why two YPN members are hosting an economic forecast presentation. Well, several years ago, we identified an opportunity to present a yearly economic forecast for HAR members. The in-person event was very popular. It sold out every year. So we decided to move the event online and make it free to all members. A win-win.
I think that was a good call. Virtual is definitely the way to go to reach more members. As we have seen the audience grow a lot over the years. HR will be converting this presentation into a podcast so even more can watch it.
Now, before we introduce Patrick Jankowski, I want to take the liberty of telling you about HAR's award-winning Young Professionals Network. HAR's board of directors established YPN 14 years ago to help younger members develop through education, community service, and most importantly, by creating a path to HAR leadership. Let's take a look at this video about who we are and what we do.
The Young Professionals Network was launched by the Houston Association of Realtors in 2010. It was the first of its kind, and the National Association of Realtors soon named Houston's YPN as the best in the country. YPN was created to encourage and develop young real estate professionals through education in and appreciation for the importance of community service and a deeper understanding of association goals that will equip them to move into leadership positions. The group has attracted hundreds of successful young professionals, and many of those have used YPN as a springboard to advisory group appointments and election to the board of directors.
See, I've been a realtor for over 20 years, and the very first group I got involved with was YPN, formerly NRG. I served on and attended every event from the annual economic update with Ted Jones to the various master classes and community outreach programs. I learned how to pivot when necessary, and the information presented was vital to my success. That being involved with YPN is one of the major factors of success in my real estate business and my brokerage.
Hi, I'm Ricky Gonzalez, the 2021 chairman for the HAR's Young Professionals Network Advisory Group. And this past weekend, young professionals from all over the city came together for one common purpose, and that was to help Miss Gloria, who in my opinion is one of the sweetest ladies I've ever met, and her grandson, Dean. So we all came together and worked with Rebuild Houston, who we partnered with in the past before. Miss Gloria, unfortunately, during Hurricane Harvey was hit pretty bad. We came together, we painted her home, we did some great landscaping. Thank you guys so much. I hope you guys enjoy what we've done for Miss Gloria, and we love you.
HAR YPN has played a huge role in my leadership journey. If you are interested in serving on advisory groups, running for the board of directors, or getting involved at Texas Realtors, YPN is a great place to start. Not only did it help me become your 2022 chair, but it's also given me some of the best friendships. If you're thinking about joining YPN, you definitely should.
Keep in mind that if you have any questions for Patrick, you may post them in the Q&A. At the end of the presentation, Patrick will answer as many questions as time allows.
And now for our feature presentation. We are fortunate to have Patrick Jankowski joining us again today. He's a Senior Vice President of Research and Chief Economist of the Greater Houston Partnership. Before working as an economist, he was a business writer for 3 local publications. The fact that 3 of those 4 publications are no longer in business is not a reflection of his ability as a writer. Look at that, an economist with a sense of humor too.
It's funny. Patrick's a funny guy. Patrick received his economics degree from the University of Texas at Austin, which makes for interesting family gatherings. Since his son and eldest daughter graduated from Texas A&M, he says, "I always remind my children they may get their education from Texas A&M, but it's paid for by my UT degree." He has worked for the Greater Houston Partnership for 40 years and has been married to Olga Jankowski for 41 years, which is a record for most marriages. Both, he says, have been wonderful experiences. Patrick, welcome back.
Thank you very much, guys. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Okay. Eddie, Troy, which screen are you seeing?
We can see the full screen.
Full
You ready
screen,
to
so I'm
rock?
good to go now.
Yes, sir.
Okay, Eddie, Troy, everybody, once again, thank you for having me back. I always enjoy presenting to HAR, and I hope that I'll give you some insights that you can use over the next 12 months. So I want to start just by talking a little bit about the U.S. economy. U.S. growth is actually doing fairly well. If you look at real GDP, which is a measure of what the government spends, what consumer spends, what businesses are investing, you can see it's been growing fairly well, a little bit above 3% or at about 3% of the last 2 quarters. We don't have data for the 4th quarter yet, but Moody's has done a forecast, and Moody's Analytics thinks that we're probably grew at about 3% in the 4th quarter. So you can look at those last 3 columns, and economic growth in the U.S. is really quite strong. And that's important because if the U.S. does well, Houston will do well. One of the things which has been supporting the economic growth is strong consumer spending. This is consumer spending, and this is not just retail. We hear an awful lot about retail, but we do more than spend in the stores. We go on vacations, we take trips, we go to the movies, we buy houses. It's just all sorts of so this is the total component of consumer spending, and you can see right there, consumer spending is still trending up very nicely. Inflation it's on its way down. The Fed is having a little bit of a problem getting that 2% goal that it would like to have. But you can see that we've definitely improved from June of 2022. In June of 2022, inflation was at about 9%. Now it's about 2.7%. There are multiple components which go into inflation. We hear about core and we hear about grocery prices and energy. They also break it out in 2 ways. One is commodities and one is services. And what I've done is I've overlaid the commodity part of inflation, the groceries we buy, the clothes that we buy, the cars that we buy, the gasoline we buy. And commodity inflation is pretty much in check. The problem is with services. These are things which obviously have a very high labor component. And it's because of the tightness of the labor market, and it's because of the inflation pressure or the pressure on wages that it's been more difficult to get that inflation rate close to 2%. But you can definitely see that both on the commodity side and on the services side, that inflation's on its way down. If you want to look at the U.S. job market, it struggled just a little bit in the fall. If you think about the hurricanes that hit Florida and went up the East Coast, and also the numerous strikes, that shows up in the October data right there, but you can look and see November got back to fairly strong growth. Now, the job growth, the long-term average is about 200,000 jobs a month, and so you can see the most recent month for which we have data has us above 200,000. We will get to December job numbers this Friday, and I'm hoping that they'll definitely should definitely be above 100,000. Hopefully, they're going to be close to 200,000. But we're really not seeing any signs of substantial growth, of substantial slowdown in the economy. Another measure of the labor market, you can look at the U.S. unemployment rate. You can see how it got up close to 15% at the worst part of the pandemic, how it's come down, and it's been tracking around 4%. Any unemployment rate below 5% represents a tight market. You can see that the unemployment rate is at about 4.3. And that's one of the reasons why the services side of inflation remains high, because there's just not a whole lot of workers on the sidelines looking for work. But we're not seeing layoffs out there. This is initial claims for unemployment benefits. This is actually a 4-week moving average. If we were seeing a substantial amount of layoffs or softness in the labor market, we would see an uptick in unemployment benefit claims. But you can see they've held fairly steady for almost 2 years now. So it's just another sign the economy is doing well, but the labor market's tight, and that's going to continue to put pressure on prices. If you want to look at the consumers overall, they're feeling pretty good about the economy. They're feeling better than they've felt in a long time. This is data from the University of Michigan's consumer confidence poll, consumer sentiment poll. I put that little red arrow in there so you can look at year-over-the-year change. And now just over the last 12 months, how consumer sentiment's improved, the perception of current economic conditions has improved, their expectations for the future has improved. And that's so important because the consumer represents about 2/3 of all economic activity in the economy, the other third being divided among business and government. And so with the consumer feeling good about the economy, they're going to continue to spend, which should continue to support economic growth. So I've got a couple of projections out there. What does 2025 look like? WSJ is the Wall Street Journal. You've got the Standard & Poor's, and you've got NABE, and you can look and see, it's Society of Professional Forecasters and NABE, and you look and see these three organizations, they're all looking at GDP growth to average about 2%, maybe a little bit slower than what we're seeing now, but still healthy. The long-term average is about 1.92%. If you want to look at inflation, inflation will trend down, but it looks like it's still going to be a little bit stubborn this year. And unemployment, though, we're not looking at seeing any significant increase in unemployment. So overall, the U.S. economy is doing well. The Wall Street Journal actually does a survey of about 70 economists and asks them a series of questions about interest rates, about oil prices, about job growth. And they also ask them what's the probability of recession over the next 12 months. And based on the responses of these 70 economists, they say the probability of a recession over the next 12 months is only 26%. And just go kind of slide up to the upper left-hand side, just to the left of the middle. You can see 2 years ago, the probability was 63%. They were off just a little bit, but we're not seeing a recession over the next 12 months. Yeah, there are going to be some bumps in the road. It's interesting. We'll see what happens with the stock market over the next 6 months. But the stock market isn't the economy. It has some reflection on the economy, but it isn't going to determine what happens in the economy. This is something that was asked by NABE, the National Association for Business Economics. It's the professional organization that I'm a member of. We asked our members in the fall, when will the next recession begin? And I put that little red box around it because you see 65%, the vast majority say the next recession won't begin until 2026 or later. Add into that the 19% that don't know or are not sure. And just, whatever survey you look at, whatever scope, we're seeing just a significant number of economists saying they do not see a recession in the U.S. future. Not in 2025, maybe not in 2026. So, the bottom line I'm trying to share with you is that the outlook for the U.S. economy is actually pretty good. And if the U.S. is doing well, then Houston will do well. Because Houston's economy is more, excuse me, I need to clear my throat. Actually, I think I need a sip of Earl Grey. A sip of Earl Grey always helps to lubricate the vocal cords. And if the U.S. economy is doing well, Houston will do well because we're more tied to the U.S. economy now than we've ever been before. We talk about oil. Oil is important, but it doesn't have the influence over Houston that it once had. And I've got a slide that'll share some insight on that a little bit later on in the presentation. So that's what the data looks like right now, but we have had a change of administration, and there are lots of policies that are being floated out there, and there is some concern among economists about what some of these policies will have on the economy. Now, I'm not going to talk about the social merits of any of this, or the ecological merits and so forth. I'm just going to talk strictly about the potential economic impacts that three of the policies that were discussed during the campaign might have on the economy. Let's just start with the concept of, drill baby drill, just opening up everything and allowing the U.S. oil and gas industry to drill as much as it wants, anywhere it wants. And this is something which is real salient to Houston because of how much the oil and gas industry is concentrated here. Well, the Dallas Fed does a survey every spring, and they ask the companies that are in Texas and the surrounding states, what price do they need to profitably drill a well? And you can see there are different responses, but on average, they need about $64 a barrel to profitably drill a new well. And so if oil is not above $64 a barrel, they're going to be less likely to drill that well. You can see where oil prices have been and see where they are right now. They've been trading roughly around $70 a barrel. So if oil prices fall below $65 a barrel, we're not going to necessarily see an increase in exploration because it just won't be profitable. And then there's this concern that we have too much oil out there to begin with. Depending upon whose data you look at, OPEC could be holding off, OPEC's holding off between 2 million barrels a day or 4 million barrels a day of production. And so it's kind of, the oil and gas industry in the U.S. is kind of reluctant to significantly boost production when all OPEC would have to do is open the spigots, flood the market with oil and drive the price down. Even with OPEC holding production off the market, there's this concern that we're still going to have too much oil in the system. And if you have the surplus, that will continue to put downward pressure on prices. And so this is concern that, oil prices, this is a headline from actually 10 years ago. We saw how this played out back in the fall of 2014, where the U.S. continued to expand production, and at some point OPEC got tired and said, we're not going to let the U.S. continue to take market share away from us. We're going to flood the market. Saudi Arabia flooded the market, drove down oil prices. And we know how that played out in 2015 and 2016. It was horrible for Houston's economy. So even though we may lift a lot of regulations on the oil and gas industry, unless the industry sees it has a price at which it can produce crude, and unless it thinks that price is going to hold for the next several years, it's not going to boost production significantly. You may see it go up some, but you're not going to see it go up in the U.S. by 1 million barrels or 2 million barrels a day. You'll see it go up by 100,000 or 200,000. So maybe a little bit of an impact on the margin, but not a huge impact on Houston's economy. There's also an awful lot of talk out there about tariffs. Different proposals have been floated. At one time, President-elect Trump said that he's going to put 100% tariff on anything from South Africa or Brazil or Russia. Those countries are floating the idea of trying to come up with a reserve currency, an alternative reserve currency to the dollar. They've talked about significant tariffs on China, the 60%. You can see the 25% tariff on Mexico and Canada. The president-elect and Congress is concerned about them not doing enough to stop illegal immigration. And even some discussion, just a 20% across-the-board tariff. Well, I want to remind you, that's Teddy Roosevelt on the left. He said, we should always speak softly but carry a big stick. Well, President-elect Trump is not known for speaking softly, but he does carry a very big stick, and that's access to the U.S. market. These are the 10 largest economies in the world. And you see, the United States economy is $10 trillion bigger than China. Now you add economies 3 through 10, Germany, Japan, India, UK, so forth, all together, they're still not as big as the United States economy. So what is pretty much threatening to do is shut off access to the U.S. economy unless a number of these countries enact policies which are more suitable for the U.S. or more suitable for just the health of the global economy. I mean, he wants Europe to take on more responsibility for their own defense. He wants Mexico and Canada to do a better job of stopping illegal immigration. China's got so many unfair trade practices. So in many cases, President Trump is justified in trying to motivate these other countries to take actions and to not sit on their hands regarding their own defense or immigration. But I am concerned, maybe you've heard something about the Smoot-Hawley Tariff Act. This was passed in 1929. It was something which was done to try to protect the U.S. industry during the height of at the beginning of the Great Depression by putting on tariffs on imports. It thought it would protect U.S. production, U.S. agriculture. But what happened was it became a tit for tat battle, and for every tariff the U.S. passed, other countries put on tariffs. And you can see right there, you can see what happened, how U.S. exports dropped significantly. And part of it was just because the global economy had slowed down, but part of it's because we put so many tariffs on our imports that other countries put on their exports. And you could see what happened in trade. And it took almost 10 years for us to get back to normal, and 10 years and a war. And so there is some concern that there may be some tit for tat in this. One thing is China's economy is not as strong as it was 4 years ago, 5 years ago, so they don't have as much leverage. But there is a concern, especially in Houston, where analysis by the Great Houston Partnership found that roughly 370,000 jobs, or $136 billion of our GDP, is tied to exports. So that could have a potential negative impact on the economy, but we'll see how it plays out. Different ideas are being floated about. I'm of the camp, I think that what we're doing is rattling our sabers, we're waving that big stick, and I think we're going to get some concessions from our trading partners, things they should have been doing all along, so they don't have high tariffs placed on their exports to the U.S., and we can continue on about our business. And then one other one, and this is very controversial, and I'll let you know what I'm sharing right now. This is not partnership policy. This is not something anybody has vetted or approved. This is simply my perception of what's going on with immigration based on the data which I have pulled. And I'm not talking about the social merits or anything else. I'm just simply looking at what are the economics of immigration in Houston. According to the U.S. Census Bureau, we have roughly 1.8 million residents in Houston that are foreign born. And that's of all types. It's both those who are documented or here or legally, those who now have U.S. citizenship, but roughly 1 in 4 Houstonians, think about that, 1 in 4 Houstonians is born outside the United States. If you drill down deeper in the data, roughly 30% of Houston's workforce was born outside the United States. Now this can, think about it. Renu Couture was born outside the United States. Think about half the people on the Astros baseball team were born outside the United States. Think of, you've probably received care in the medical center from someone, a doctor that was born outside the United States, but they are now practicing their profession here. So I want to do, this is a back of the envelope calculation. This is unscientific, but just trying to get some sense for where are we with the undocumented population. Because the vast majority of those in Houston who are foreign born are here. They're either resident aliens, they have work permits, or they have granted citizenship. My wife was born outside the U.S. She's a U.S. citizen. My daughter's fiance was born outside the U.S. He's a U.S. citizen. But there are those undocumented out there. Now, the Pew Research Center, you may know Pew, they sponsor an awful lot of stuff on PBS. If you ever watch PBS or listen to NPR, they estimate that there are 1.2 million undocumented residents in the Texas workforce. And if you look at Houston's share of Texas population, Houston has roughly 1/4 of the state's population. So that would suggest that there are perhaps 300,000 undocumented workers in the region, give or take. So, and that's on a workforce of about 3.5 million. So it's not an insignificant number. If we decided to ship all those, if we decided to deport every one of those, we would see an impact on the economy. I can't tell you by how much it would impact the economy. I can't tell you other than maybe construction and hospitality would have the biggest impact. But just acknowledging the fact that we have perhaps as many as 300,000 undocumented workers, people working in the economy right now. So those are three of the administration's proposals, and try to give you a little bit of insight of how they might potentially impact the economy. We won't know until executive orders are issued, until policies are enacted, until Congress passes laws. But these are things that we should be watching. So I want to shift a little bit and talk about Houston. I need a sip of Earl Grey real quick. It's my favorite Earl Grey. When I talk about Houston, I am talking about the metropolitan area. You can see it up there on the screen. It's the 10 counties. It's Harris and all the counties immediately surrounding it. You know, it's an area with 7.5 million people, 3.7 million workers, almost a $700 billion economy. Over the last 12 months, the 12 months ending in November, because that's what we have. So from number 23 to 24, we added 62,500 jobs. A little bit below the long-term average of about 65,000, 70,000, but still fairly decent because of some of the uncertainty we had in the fall. It slowed down just a little bit. If you want to see where the growth is occurring, a lot of it's occurred in construction and healthcare, wholesale trade, professional, scientific, and technical services, and so forth. Only a few sectors lost jobs. Information, that's been a trend that's been occurring over the last 20 years. Transportation and warehousing, that's a very small loss. I think it's probably going to end up being revised. The administrative support is really interesting. That is a huge loss, but it doesn't necessarily reflect a dramatic change in demand or supply and demand in the economy. What we found out from some of the research is administrative support is where contract workers used to fall, or where they fall. And so individuals, workers would sign on with an employment agency and then on a contract basis, and that employment agency then would place them working in a warehouse, or place them working in an accounting firm, or place them working in a restaurant or someplace like that. What we're seeing is that Houstonians are bypassing the employment agencies and signing on for gig work and doing it themselves. So this is an example of gig work. So it's not that we're seeing a downturn in contract workers, it's that they're doing their own work and they're becoming gig workers, going from job to job, something. So that doesn't concern me. So if you want to look at where we are, we've added over 300,000, we're 300,000 jobs above where we were prior to the pandemic. You can see the pandemic dip there. Think about 300,000 jobs. That's a huge number of jobs since May of 2020. If you want to look at where we fit compared to the other metropolitan areas, you can see we've actually ranked third in the U.S. in job creation. Dallas is just marginally ahead of us, but Dallas has 600,000 more people than Houston does, and that's actually Dallas-Fort Worth. You know, we've created, New York's created about twice as many jobs, but New York has 3 times the population. Now, Los Angeles is larger than us, population-wise. So you could see, compared to our peers, we're doing fairly well. You might kind of look at the lower right-hand side. You can see there are areas that are struggling somewhat. So what has been driving this growth? Well, what I've got on the screen, it's a magazine cover. It's a magazine cover for something called Site Selection Magazine. It's a trade journal for organizations in economic development. It's a trade journal the partnership subscribes to. It's companies, organizations that are trying to work to get corporations to relocate or expand into the region. They do what they refer to as a competition every year, and they rate the metropolitan areas by the number of relocations and expansions they've had in their region of some significance, 50 jobs or more, 20,000 more square feet leased, and so on. And for the most current year, we had Houston ranked third. We had over 400 companies announce plans to relocate or expand operations in Houston. So that's been supporting growth. Now, this is a long-term version of that chart I showed you earlier, how we recovered from the pandemic. You kind of look to the right-hand side, and you can see that dip. And I put that up because as long as Houston's economy expands, that's going to have benefits to other sectors. That green line is as business, professional, technical services, you know, the white-collar jobs, the engineering, the accounting, the law, the marketing, the consulting, the IT support, and so forth. And you can see as long as Houston's economy is growing, we're going to continue to see growth in those areas, and we're expecting to see growth next year. So these white-collar sectors are going to continue to expand. Construction's doing fairly well. If you look to the right-hand side, through November, $39 billion worth of contracts issued. Means for when we finally get December number, we'll have over $40 billion worth of construction contracts issued. Did not expect this given the high interest rates and the overbuilt office space, but we're seeing lots of projects, especially in places like the medical center and freeway construction, and still seeing strong housing permits and so forth. And so that's something which has been supporting Houston's strong economic growth. If you look at tonnage through the Port of Houston, flattened out a little bit. I wouldn't say that's a negative. What I'd say is we're at a steady state for the port. Depending upon what happens with the potential tariffs, that may dip a little bit, but it may pick back up. There may be a little bit of a pause right there. And this is healthcare employment. And this is the total number of jobs each year that healthcare has added. Now, as far back as I can go, I've only got 20 years worth of data up there. I went back 30 years. Healthcare has never lost jobs in Houston over the last 30 years. It continues to add jobs and add jobs and add jobs. And there are a couple of reasons for that. For one thing, Houston's population continues to grow. And think of population growth feeds the consumer base. Consumers, the population, they are consumers of healthcare. We have roughly 90,000, 95,000 babies born every year. They're going to need doctors and healthcare services. We have the population over the age of 65 grows by about 30,000 a year. People move into that age cohort. As you age, you tend to see your doctor more often. That supports the demand for healthcare. So you can see, healthcare will continue to grow next year and should continue to grow. I wouldn't say indefinitely, but I'd be surprised if we ever see a year in which we create fewer than 7,000 jobs in healthcare going forward. I might be surprised if we ever see a year when we create fewer than 8,000. So just as another sign, this is the Houston Purchasing Managers Index. This is one of my favorite data series. They've done some adjustment to it, but it's the Institute for Supply Management surveys purchasing managers in the region and asks them a series of questions about employment levels, about backlogs, about sales, about inventory, crunches all those numbers and come up with an index. Whenever the index is above 45, it used to be 50, now the index they've readjusted it, we're above 45. That's a sign Houston's economy is expanding and will continue to expand in the next 3 to 6 months. And you can see based on what the purchasing managers are seeing out there. Think about it, who has some of the best insight as to what's happening in the firm? It's the purchasing manager. They see the orders on the books. They know how much they're going to have in the warehouse or the supply closet or arriving on the docks to meet the orders that are on the books. So we're still looking at strong growth there, according to the Purchasing Managers Index. And then, I'm going to need another sip of Earl Grey. And I want to talk a little bit about the Kinder Houston Area Survey. It used to be known as the Stephen Kleinberg Survey. He was a professor at Rice who started doing this in the 80s. But every February, the organization, the Kinder Institute, does a survey of area residents and asks them a series of questions about transportation, about crime, about attitudes towards immigrants, about the national economy. But they ask some very important questions, which gives you a little bit of insight into the mindset of Houstonians. One of the things they asked them, how do you feel about the future? And 72% of Houstonians who responded to the survey said they're excited about the future. They're not worried. And think about that. We don't have a Houston equivalent to the Michigan Sentiment Index, but maybe we do in something like this. If you're a Houstonian and you're excited about the future, you're going to be more likely to buy that house. You're going to be more likely to take that vacation. You're not going to be pulling back on your spending. You're going to continue to spend. If you're a business and you're excited about the future, you're going to make that capital investment. You're going to hire. You're going to go ahead and make those extra expenditures. You're going to be looking for markets to expand into. So it's kind of a take on Houstonians' attitudes. If you have an economy where 3/4 of the people in the economy have a pretty upbeat outlook for the future, that's going to fuel local growth. And what's interesting, that's the overall number. If you look at it by ethnic group, whatever ethnic group you're in, they asked, the vast majority, it's a little bit higher for some groups, but well over half in every group were excited about the future. If you look at it by educational attainment levels, those with higher level education see greater possibilities here. But even those without a high school diploma are excited about the future. If you look at it by age bracket, you young professionals out there, thank you very much, are excited about the future. Maybe some of the older adults that are not quite as excited, but you're still seeing well over half across all age groups are excited about the future. And if you look at it even by income level, well over half by income level excited about the future. And as I said, that's the sort of thing that if people have an upbeat attitude, they're more likely to look for a new job, or to hire, or to make the investment, or to spend, or to take out that loan. And that sort of optimism is something which helps support growth in the region. So kind of getting to the last of some of my general economy slides, and I'll talk a little bit about real estate. Excuse me one second, I need to clear my throat. And just population growth, and you can see population growth over the last 10 years. Now, 17 and 18, we were dealing with the tail end of the fracking bust and dealing with Hurricane Harvey. Then we had a little bit of dealing with COVID, but in the last 2 years, we've added over 125,000 in residents. Part of that is that those babies that are being born. We have 95,000 babies born every year. We have 35,000 people die every year. You subtract that, you get a net natural increase of about 60,000. But you add on top of that everyone who's moving here. We won't know that number until April, but judging by all the out-of-state license plates on I-10 that I saw this morning coming into work, we're still seeing population growth, strong population growth. And that population growth supports the retail operations. It supports restaurants and bars, arts, entertainment, personal service, and government. Government in the sense of a lot of, 2/3 of all government employees work in education here in the region. So now all those factors are supporting growth and will continue to support growth in 2025. But I want to talk a little bit about energy, why energy isn't the big thing. No, it's still a big thing. It's still important, but it doesn't have the same sort of influence in Houston as it once did. And it's still a solid foundation, but it doesn't drive the economy. And I want to show you that in just 2 slides. You can see here, this is U.S. oil production. And I'm going to show you Houston Energy Jobs, and you can see, this is Houston Energy Jobs, and you can see where we are. And you can see how we peaked at the end of 2014 at the height of the fracking boom. That long decline where we lost over 70,000, close to 80,000 jobs. Slight recovery till we got to the pandemic, and then the drop in the pandemic, and we haven't even gotten back to where we were prior to the pandemic. So you can see where we are right now. We're about 80,000 jobs below where we were at our peak. And that's for Houston. And overlay that with the red line, and that's U.S. crude production. And look, we've managed to grow production. Production today is over double where it was during the fracking boom. Yet we're doing it with third fewer employees. So energy is important, but we're not going to see a huge run up in hiring in the energy industry. We might get some benefit from mergers. As companies merge and they pull operations, the company they acquired in Oklahoma or Arkansas or Colorado, they acquire that company and they meld their operations back into Houston. We may see some growth there, but the energy industry needing to bring on significant number of staff to boost production, we're not going to see that. So let me shift. I want to talk a little bit about commercial real estate. Some of the things we see going on in commercial real estate here in the Houston region. This is available office space. This is both direct and sublet. And going back the last 10 years, coming out of the fracking boom, the vacancy rate was about 15.5%. That's kind of where we'd like to see the vacancy rate in Houston, somewhere in the teens. The current vacancy rate is pretty close to 25%. So there's a lot of vacant or available space out there. Some of that space, or significant amount of space, is in Class B and C buildings, which will never be leased. But we're still not seeing a huge amount of absorption out there. It's still somewhat struggling. And I don't see a huge uptick in leasing of office space anytime soon, unless we start to see more pressure on corporations putting more pressure on employees to come back into the office full time. And that's only going to have a marginal impact. The good thing is, even though the vacancy rate is so high, we're not seeing a whole lot of office construction. It's gone down significantly. And a lot of what's under construction is pre-leased, or it's in a very niche market. There'll always be some demand for brand new Class A space, the space with the highest amenities, the best located, maybe office space in some of the fast growing suburbs that tends to be more professional services and medical. But it's unlikely we're going to see any really tall 40-story office buildings built anytime soon, because we just don't need the space. sign of kind of a slowdown is the number of lease transactions is actually it's down from where we were over the last 3 years. It's only barely above where we were in the worst part of the pandemic. The amount of transactions kind of goes back to where we were in 2017. So we're not seeing a whole lot of office deals out there. We're not seeing a whole lot of absorption of office space. If anything, I think we're kind of like at a steady state. And rather than seeing any surge in office demand, we'll see just maybe a moderate increase year over year in office demand going forward for the next few years. Let's go talk a little bit about available industrial space. This is the vacancy rate or the availability rate, both direct and sublet. Coming out of the oil bust, the fracking bust, we were at about 5.3%. Got up as high as 8.2%, dipped as we saw this huge surge in e-commerce, and it's back up a little bit again. A little bit of concern about overbuilding and industrial space. It's not too far out of alignment. The good news is that we're seeing a significant drop off in industrial construction. And so we'll most likely see this 7.1% availability rate of both direct and sublet drop well below 7% in 2025 because we're seeing a significant pullback on industrial construction. And while when you look at an office construction, it takes a couple of years to put up an office building, you can get a tilt wall industrial space warehouse built in a year or less. And so this is able to respond fairly quickly to the market. I talked about that. You're seeing transactions as somewhat plateaued as well. So we're not seeing a whole lot of lease transactions there. So I'm kind of referring to this as kind of a steady state, a more stable state, maybe a more sustainable state of leasing of industrial and office. So you shouldn't expect a boom. You shouldn't expect a surge. What you should expect in 2025 is pretty much more of the same, unless there's some sort of black swan event that changes everything. But as far as commercial real estate, 25 will probably look a lot like 2024. So I want to talk a little bit about the consumer side of real estate. Let's talk about home sales. We had that huge surge in home construction coming out of the home buying out of the pandemic, and you can see it's gone down. And once again, I think this has come down to a more sustainable level. This is single family, duplexes, townhomes, condos. It's not just single family. It's everything all mixed in together. But you can see that we're pretty much off that huge surge and back to what I would consider a more sustainable level for residential sales. The big issue is interest rates, as everybody knows. We'll see what the Fed does. Even though the Fed has lowered interest rates, we're not seeing a significant drop off in mortgage rates. We may be in a period where something above 6 remains normal for quite some time. The time to refinance or to purchase was in the pandemic or just coming out of the pandemic. I was very lucky. I refinanced my home early in 2020 and got just an incredible rate. Maybe I shouldn't brag about that. If you want to look at listings are up. This is what you're looking at is a 12-month moving average, and you can look and see that listings are up about 31,000 listings. So that's good. So there is product out there for home buyers to look at and to buy. And you see home prices have fairly much stabilized. And this is data as of November. The data which I received is embargoed until noon today. Some brand new numbers will come out around noon today, but I don't think it's gone up significantly from that. So we had that huge run up in the pandemic, coming out of the pandemic, and it looks like home prices have stabilized, which makes it a little bit easier to get into a house. The fact that prices have stabilized, but we do need to see mortgage rates come down and real wage rates go up. Vehicle sales have also somewhat stabilized. That's a sign. If you remember, if you drove around Houston and looked at the dealership lots in 2021, there was no inventory on the lot. Now you drive around and you see lots of inventory on the lot, which has helped put a little bit downward pressure on prices. And it looks like car sales have stabilized and car prices have stabilized, vehicle prices have stabilized. So now is a pretty good time to buy a vehicle if you need to buy one. I knew the automobile market had turned a corner when watching network TV. I started seeing ads, 0% down, 0% interest for 60 months, and all sorts of incentives that the vehicle manufacturers are starting to offer. So it is a good time to buy a car. And this is a multifamily or apartments. I've circled 3 different data sets from apartment data. You can look over the last left-hand side over the last 12 months, roughly 19,000 apartments, mainly Class A absorbed. Problem is we put 25,000 on the market. The good news is that we're pulling back on construction, so the market should balance. I mean, if you look at that one right next to it, rental rate growth on average is only 1%. We'd like to see at least 3 to 4% per year. As we pull back on construction, that should allow the market to absorb more of these units. We might see a little bit of rent rate growth. But you can definitely see what's happened to Class A rents from their peak of about $1,800 a month to $1,700 a month. So you can look at over roughly a 3-year period, rents have gone down by what, $80. But if you adjust that for inflation, they've gone down by significantly more than that. That's because of the overbuilding. But going back to the slide, with fewer than 15,000 under construction, which is pretty much what we absorb in a normal year, we should hopefully start to see some increase in rents sometime later this year. So getting towards the end of my presentation, I only have about 8 more slides left, and then I'll take Q&A. Forecast for 2025, partnerships forecast is for 71,200 jobs. It's a little bit above the long-term average. It's about 65, 70,000 jobs, depending upon what else is happening in the economy. So it's just a little bit above the long-term average. Gets back to my theme that what we're doing is we're hitting a sustainable pace of growth, not a boom or a bust, but something which is sustainable. And I think that this decade is probably going to look a lot like the 90s, which is slow, steady growth. If you want to see what sectors are going to be growing, we expect growth in every sector except for information, and that's part of that long-term trend. If you want more information, it's the partnerships website. It's the easiest web address in the world to remember, www.houston.org. You can go there and you can find the full details on the forecast. So I just want to put this just a little bit into a long-term perspective. I've been studying this economy for 40 years, and I've seen it add over 2 million jobs over 40 years. Think about that, 2 million jobs. That's roughly 50,000 jobs a year on average. And we've added 2 million jobs in spite of the fact that we've had 6 recessions. And you can see I've labeled the recessions there, the 2 oil busts of the 80s, the Enron fiasco, the Great Recession, the fracking bust, the COVID pandemic. So in spite of 6 recessions, we've added 2 million jobs. Not only have we had 2 million jobs, we've had 16 hurricanes. And you look and see the hurricanes there, and add the tropical storms and the hurricanes and the recessions together, and you can see it looks like Houston's just been getting hit constantly by something. I mean, everyone remembers Beryl, that was recently, and a lot of people remember Harvey and Ike. And there are a lot of other things in there that maybe you don't remember that did have an impact on Houston. There's Hurricane Dean, Tropical Storm Dean. There was Hurricane Alicia, Tropical Storm Imelda. But think about everything Houston's gone through the last 40 years, yet we've still managed to add 2 million jobs. So my point is, if you wanted one word to describe Houston's economy, if you had to sum up the last 90 some odd slides in one word, I'd do it with this. One thing at Houston, it is resilient. So with that, I'm done. Thank you very much. I appreciate your time. I appreciate your patience. I'm going to email a PDF of these to the Houston Association of Realtors, and they will be able to distribute it to others who listen to this call. So thank you again. I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and I will take some calls. Hey, Eddie, Tori, it's good to see you again.
How's it going?
Thanks, Patrick.
It's fine. My vocal cords are a little dry, but I do have my cup of Earl Grey.
No, you killed it. Thank you so much, Patrick. And wow, what a way to start the new year. That's a lot of information to digest, and I see we have many questions in the Q&A. So let's get to them. Our first question comes from our HAR chair, Shay Cotter. You talked about the high supply of oil and gas, but what about wind energy? Texas is a top producer. The new administration has indicated they would like to limit wind energy. What kind of impact might that have on the state?
That is a real concern. The thing is limiting wind energy, that won't stop what's already in place. That's already there. It'll force wind energy to be a little bit more economical. It'll have to get the return will have to be based on the full metrics and not on any incentives. It'll be interesting to see because Texas isn't alone. There are a lot of other states that have wind energy and potential wind energy. I suspect there may be some pushback on that. I think that maybe the subsidies or the tax credits won't be quite as generous, but I don't see it going away. It gets to some of the legislation that was passed under the current administration. There are a lot of people who are in favor of the tax incentives and so forth. So I think we'll see maybe some scaling back, but I don't see it pulling back 100%.
Okay, thanks for that.
Thanks, Patrick. There are a lot of luxury high-rise condos inside the loop. What do you forecast for this year and beyond? And do you still see a demand?
Okay, luxury condo market is not one I follow real closely. There will always be a demand. The question is the demand going to be strong enough to absorb everything which is in supply? One thing that will help is you get condos. Some of the condos are owned by foreign nationals. And as long as we can continue to allow the foreign nationals to come and visit Houston, whether they come here to visit Houston because they need medical treatment or they come here to visit Houston because they want to set up a business, I mean, that's the market. So if you try to look at it, it's really going to depend upon the ability to us to continue to bring foreign nationals here, plus some of the other organic growth. Yes, there'll be demand, but it might not be as strong as you would like to see it.
Got it. Another question is, how does Houston's housing affordability compare to elsewhere in the country?
Oh gosh, HR, you guys have some good data on that. Yeah, housing affordable. It's the thing is, for those of us who've been here for long, HR has all sorts of stuff at its website. I encourage you to go there and find it. They do a housing affordability index. We are one of the. There's two sides of the story. Housing is not as affordable in Houston as it was 5 years ago or 10 years ago. But when you compare housing in Houston to any other metropolitan area, any other major metropolitan area, it is still very affordable. You're looking at it taking the equivalent to, if you took the median priced home and you divide it by median household income, you're looking at maybe 3.5 years of income to buy a home in Houston. Or if you look at someplace like LA, it's 10 years of income. Or someplace like like Atlanta, it's 4.5 years of income. So it's still affordable. It's just not, it's affordable in relation to other metros. It's not affordable in relation to where we were 10 years ago.
Okay, so how does AI impact workforce?
That's going to be, it has the potential to have a significant impact.
All right.
But we don't know yet the degree of significance and how well it will be used. My team, everybody on my team already uses AI. We use it to do the research, we use it to the analysis. It has made us much more efficient. It's made us able to find data that we haven't been able to find otherwise. But we still have to do the insight. We still have to do the manipulation of the data. So I'm using us as an example. I see there will be some tasks that AI will replace, but it's not going to replace everyone. I see AI is taking probably 5 years to be fully implemented in the workforce. I see AI the same way, I've been doing this for 40 years. I can remember when you'd interview someone and you ask them, do you know Microsoft? Do you know Excel? And he had people says, no, I don't. Now, it's a given. Who doesn't know Microsoft? Who doesn't know Excel? I think 5 years from now, it's going to be the same way with AI. They're going to say, you're going to have to ask someone, what do you use? What version of AI do you use? And tell me how you use it. And it's going to be another tool that you're going to have to hold down a white collar job. It's going to be something that'll make the white collar workers more efficient, but it won't replace them. But what it does, it puts encumbers upon us is it's one more skill set we have to acquire. Think about all the skills you have to have for Word, all the skills for Excel, or the PowerPoint skills, and now you're going to have to add this additional skill. And you have to be able to do it not just as a glorious search engine. You're going to have to find more intelligent ways to use the intelligence of AI. So it'll make you more efficient, hopefully reduce some stress. It may be one way we get around some of those issues with labor shortages, but we won't know for 5 years. But I think within 5 years we will know. I think within 5 years we're going to look back and say, gosh, do you remember when we were in that transition period where no one wanted to show up in the office and everyone was afraid of IA, and look at where we are now?
Okay, that's an excellent point. Thank you for that. Now, despite higher mortgage rates, we saw higher home sales at the tail end of 2024. Do you think this is an indicator of increasing consumer confidence?
Yes, there's definitely increased consumer confidence out there.
Right.
I think we've seen a dramatic shift starting early November in consumer confidence. Also, there's other factors out there, not me, other economists. I mean, I've been saying we are not going to have a recession, and I've been saying that for the last 3 years. But so many other economists said recession, 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 and people held back because they were worried about the recession. I think they finally accepted the fact that, no, we're not going to have a recession. I'm going to go ahead and buy that house, or I'm going to buy that car. And I think that's where the consumer confidence play. I think the fact that, as I showed you with that Wall Street Journal slide, and it showed the probability of recession in 2022 was 63%, most rational consumers aren't going to go out and buy a new car. They're going to stay in the house they're in because they don't want to take on an additional note, or they're going to continue to rent. Because if worse comes to worse, you move in with a buddy or you move back in with your parents. And I think that the fact that people have finally accepted the fact that we are not going to have a recession is what's spurring them to spend and feel like, okay, I'm going to go ahead and make that long-term financial commitment and take out a 15-year or a 30-year mortgage.
Great answer. From our audience, the Houston City Council is discussing restricting short-term rentals. What are the pros and cons of Houston potentially restricting short-term rentals?
That's not something I've studied. I don't know why they feel they need to do that. You know, it's just, there's an old joke in economics, and one of the jokes is there's only two answers to every question in economics. One, it's supply and demand, and the other is government interference in the market. And I would put city councils wanting to regulate that as their interference in the market. Maybe there's some things they need to do for health and safety, but if it affects the level of rents, if rents go up as a result, it'll add to the housing affordability issues we have here.
Got it. Do you see an expected adjustment on real estate housing anytime soon?
How are you defining expected adjustment? That's a broad term.
Uh,
Think things shifting in favor of
You mean whether it's going to be more buyer friendly or seller friendly? Oh, I think
yeah.
I think it's already buyer friendly. In the sense that we've seen what's happened with the number of listings have gone back up significantly, and we see that the median price home prices have flattened. So I think it's definitely shifting more to a buyer's market. If we saw some significant movement on interest rates, I think we could see a surge in home buying. But I don't think we're going to see a significant happen with interest rates. Even if the Fed lowers interest rates, Treasury bill rates are going up, and mortgage rates are more tied to the T-bill. And so I hate to say this, but I know I'm preaching to the choir here. But I have people ask me, is now a good time to buy a house? And I say, if you find a house that you're in love with, it's a good time to buy that house. If you find a neighborhood that you really like and a house now's the time to buy that house. Don't try to time the market. Look at it as, where do I want to live, and in what neighborhood do I want to live, and what do I want to surround myself with? And that should be the primary motivator. Yeah, there may be some financial issues in there, but housing provides lifestyle and security and shelter, and that should be your primary, in my opinion, your primary reason for buying a house is you want the shelter function. You don't buy it because it's an investment. You buy it because you want to live in a house and you want to live in that neighborhood.
Okay, another question for you. Do you see crypto coming into the space in the home buying purchases, I'm sorry?
I have not stated that at all, so that's not something I can. And I'll just let you know I'm not a fan of crypto. I'll just say
All right.
that.
That's fair enough. Now, another question, is it fair to correlate potential tariffs with sharp increase in home, new construction sales prices, considering building materials are often imported from overseas? What is the projected timeline impact of increased tariffs to when consumers will start to feel the impact?
That's a good question. I do know that some of the builders have been stockpiling and filling up their warehouses with whatever they could, whether it's cabinetry or sinks or windows or so forth. So, and the thing is, if the tariffs are considered something permanent, you'll start to see shifts in supply chains and you'll see maybe manufacturing come back to the U.S. But if manufacturing comes back to the U.S., it's not going to come back to the U.S. with a whole lot of employment. Any new factory that's built in the U.S. is going to be heavily automated. Or you might see the components move to a nation which we consider more friendly, both politically and economically. But once again, we have to see how all that plays out, because tariffs do have an impact on inflation, and if we're not careful, we can see inflation go back up, and that would be something that would be very difficult for the Fed to bring back down because it doesn't have control over tariffs.
Great. Thank you, Patrick, for all your insightful answers and information. If you pre-register for today's presentation, you'll receive Patrick's slides deck via email. And as a reminder, HR will produce a podcast that will be available to all members. Details about the podcast will be posted in the HAR weekly newsletter. Thank you again, Patrick, for sharing your forecast with us today.
I'm glad to do it, and I hope I've given you guys some insights that you can use and that you can go out and sell homes and make money.
Absolutely.
That's what we want. What we did not mention is that Patrick is retiring from the partnership this month. So we want to wish him well. And thank you for always delivering actionable information in a conversational way. We wish you the best of luck in your next passage.
Oh, thank you very much. You'll see me around, just not in this capacity.
That's always good.
Thank you so much, Patrick. And in this highly competitive industry, agents need to learn as much as they can and should be taking advantage of HAR's affordable and sometimes even free professional development courses. You could be leaving money on the table, so don't miss out on these training opportunities. Thank you again, Patrick, for joining us today, and we wish you a happy retirement. You will be missed.
And remember, if you want to learn more about our award-winning YPN, make sure to follow our YPN Facebook page to stay in the know.
Have a safe, happy, and prosperous New Year, everyone.
Happy New Year.